8:48 at iFiber One on a Friday morning, and good morning to you. I'm Jeff Slakey in with another great guest as we have some riveting radio real estate, and we're close to wrapping up that alphabet. I know that I am I'm like a speed bump every single time that we start talking about these things, but I always come up with these questions. I just got to ask Don Pannell from John L. Scott and Shelton. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and questions are perfectly okay.
Good.
And if we don't quite make it through the alphabet, that's not a major catastrophe either. We can go over into next year.
So we are talking today. We're going to start with the letter T.
T. Yes, we finally made it through S. That was a long one because that was the seller's disclosure form, which is a long form to begin with. So all of these that we're going to talk about today, I'm going to try and get through T, U, and V today, are things that we've talked about before.
Okay.
So it's just a reminder. So T stands for title, and that is the document that you get from the title and escrow company. And what it is all of the legal stuff that goes with the property. So it's the legal description, it's any easements that are associated with the property, anything like that. So it's a good thing to look through. Sometimes it can be a fairly lengthy document, but it's good to just kind of leaf through it just to make sure you understand that this is what you're buying. Sometimes there will be easements and things like that on a property that buyers don't necessarily know about. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes I try and include a contingency in an offer that is a title contingency. So what that does is protects the buyer in case they do see something. So I had a case one time where they didn't realize that there was an easement for overhead power lines, and they didn't want to be around overhead power lines. So once they found out that that was in the title, then they decided they didn't want to buy that place.
Okay.
So the title contingency then gave them a reason to back out of the sale and get their earnest money back. So I don't always do that just because there are enough other protections most of the time in a purchase and sale agreement. But if that is something that you as a buyer really are concerned about, then be sure and talk to the agent that's doing your offer and see that that's included.
So there is a lot of legalese on these title documents.
There is.
If for the uninitiated, the first-time home buyer, are there certain areas that you may want to look at first to try to understand better, or are there certain phrases that may pop out that would be a red flag for someone, especially if they're not really quite sure what they're looking for?
Right. In the first couple of pages, it just depends on who the title company is. But it's usually in like the first 5 or 6 pages. There is a section that's called conditions.
Okay.
And so that's where these easements and things like that would be located. So that's a good place to start.
It's kind of the overview.
Yeah, and then a lot of times too, if it's in a community, then that's where you'll find the covenants and restrictions and HOA information, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that's all in there, which is why sometimes they can be as much as 160, 170 pages long.
Yeah.
So you just have to look through, but that conditions place is a good place to start. One caveat about that though is that there is usually a thing in there that talks about mining rights and that kind of stuff. And typically on a lot of properties, the state of Washington reserves mining rights and those kinds of things. So sometimes people will see that and go, whoa, but it's kind of a normal thing. It doesn't really affect your use of the property most of the time.
Sure.
I mean, but do take a look. And if it is something that concerns you, then that is something that you can ask the escrow people to explain to you and what exactly that means.
Okay.
So
I remember that process of signing all those old papers.
Right.
It's a long process.
Oh, it is.
But the folks there were easy to talk to, and they go through this a lot, and they know a lot of the questions you're going to ask.
They've probably heard most of the questions.
Yeah.
And I usually, for something like the title document, if a client calls me and has questions, I usually refer them to the title company because it's their document.
Sure.
So they would be able to, I can kind of answer general questions, but if they have something specific, then the people who originate the document are the ones to talk to. So anyway, but it's an important thing. I mean, it's something that you have to have, and it's part of that legal process. So letter U stands for under contract.
Okay.
And that is when the buyer has submitted an offer and the seller has accepted the offer, but it's not final yet.
Okay.
So
we're still in the waiting game.
Yes, we're in that process between an accepted offer and actual closing. So, and that can be anywhere from 2 weeks to a month and a half, depending on, lender issues and that kind of stuff. So, but it also means that you, as the buyer, have a signed contract. So the only reason anybody else could come in and have a different offer would be if you backed out of that offer for some reason. So say you didn't like the results of the inspection, or you found something on the title that you didn't like, and you cancel the contract, then somebody else can come in. But you're in first position as the buyer to buy that house.
Starting to get real exciting.
You're starting
at
to
that
get
point.
serious about it. Yeah.
Cool.
Keeping in mind, though, that there are still plenty of things that can happen.
Yeah.
Inspection is a big one. If you find something that just is something you don't want to deal with and the seller isn't going to fix it, then, if it's serious enough, then you have that opportunity to back away from the sale.
Okay.
So you always want to protect yourself as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure.
And as an agent, I usually try and make sure that everybody's protected as much as we possibly can make it. I mean, that doesn't say that you don't always, every once in a while, run into things that you didn't anticipate, but you try and look ahead as much as possible. So
letter V.
Letter
already?
V. Whoa!
We
We zip it. We might even get to W today.
Don't get too ahead of yourself.
Right. Well, letter V is for VA loan.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And we've talked about this a lot, and that is a mortgage loan for veterans and their spouses made by private lenders and guaranteed by the U.S. government.
Sure.
So as a veteran, that is one of your benefits, that you can get special financing. And for the seller, that means that they typically have to participate in the closing costs things. The main one is that the way it's set up, the veteran is not responsible for paying half of the escrow fee.
Okay.
So the seller has to pay their half of the escrow fee and the buyer's half of the escrow fee. So, and that's just the way that the VA has set that up. So I always try and remind, if I'm representing the seller, I make sure that they understand that
this is the type of loan that's coming in.
And then the other caveat, a lot of times for the seller, is that sometimes they use special appraisers for VA, and sometimes they are a little more particular than just a conventional loan appraiser. So just for sellers to be aware of that. And unfortunately, that is why a lot of times sellers will not accept VA loans. And that's unfortunate because, the veteran is just trying to find a place to live.
Sure.
So, you have to kind of work through all of those things. So, and a lot of times what will happen is that the buyer will offer a higher price to compensate for the seller having to pay the escrow fee. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They just go, hey, here's the price, take it or leave it. But it is a great thing for somebody who has that veteran's benefit, and if you have it, it's always a good way to go for your first thing, and it is guaranteed by the government. So and that's why I think they're probably a little more particular, is that they don't want to be stuck with if the veteran defaults, then the government's going to be in a position of having to pay that off and move it on. So they want to make sure that they're not doing something that's going to come back and bite them.
Yeah.
So you can understand both sides of it.
Sure.
So
Dawn, how can folks get in touch with you?
They can call me at 360-490-4493. Or come and see me on the corner of 3rd and Railroad, right behind the clock tower. I would love to see you. And again, I always tell people, if I'm not there, somebody in the office will know where I am.
Somebody knows.
Somebody will know where I am, and I will make arrangements to come down and meet with you. So love to see you. I encourage everybody this time of year to take a look at maybe possibly listing their house, or this is still a good time to look.
Sure.
Too.
Sure.
So would love to see folks.
Dawn Pannell from John L. Scott and Shelton, Riveting Radio Real Estate. Have a great day, great weekend.
Yes,
I
will.
See you in about downtown too tonight.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Some of the fun.
First Friday holiday magic night tonight.